So now we're going to talk about how to get healthy in this program. There's no departure in this thing from doing the steps. That's still the core of the recovery program. And before we can go forward with this thing, we know that we have to identify the problem, and the problem's alcoholism. And so I guess what I want to do, and let me explain before we go any further, that this really by necessity has to be a dialogue. And I'm not going to sit here all day today and tomorrow morning and just talk. So I want this to be interactive. I want to hear from you. There are people here with microphones that are going to come around. But I want you to share your experience with me and what we're talking about, and I want you to ask questions if you have one. I've been doing this every year, just almost ad nauseum. Once a year to go through and challenge everything I know and believe. And the net result is that while I still have occasional emotional challenges and things like that, which I think are a pretty normal part of life, it's not to any degree the kind of frustration and anger and confusion that I had when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. We truly have so much bad information, and we guard it. We truly do. Usually at some point when you were a child or whatever, there were some seeds planted in your mind about who and what you were. And usually by someone who was angry at you or whatever, and they said something unkind, and maybe not with particularly bad intent, but that thing planted in your head. And you've been nurturing and growing and protecting it ever since. And the hardest thing for me in Alcoholics Anonymous when I go to meetings today is to listen to people talk about themselves. Not because they're talking about themselves, but because they're describing a person that doesn't represent them at all. And you sit there and listen to someone describe themselves when they're talking, and they don't have to be even talking about themselves. Everyone talks about themselves all the time, even though it doesn't sound like they're doing that. They're still describing themselves. And so if you listen closely, they'll tell you who they think you are. They are. And when you hear what they think they are, it's rarely what you see. And the reason why is because of all this bad information. Now, I'm not sure I've ever met anyone that was exempt from that. So, I go to AA meetings and listen to people talk, and I just want to scream. Just want to say, how can you believe that? I'm going to show you something about, when we get to it, about writing inventory today. I mentioned yesterday when I spoke that when you write inventory, you write about people, institutions, and principles, and that my first inventory I'd written about people and institutions, and it didn't have the slightest idea what to write about principles. When I was 28 years sober, I started writing inventory because of an odd experience I had about principles, which are our beliefs, and it changed my life when I was 28 years sober. and there was a big chunk that was filled in at that point in time, and I was able to challenge all these things that I believed about myself. I can tell you now, and I'll mention it again when we get to it, that the conclusion to writing an inventory, first of all, is not about finding the truth, just so you know that. And most people think inventory is about finding the truth. It's not. It's about finding the lie. And when you write about people and institutions, and particularly principles, that's about finding the lies that are floating around in our heads about who and what we think we are. And once you find that, it will give you a measure of freedom to become the person that you'd like to be, and more particularly the person that God would like you to be. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about really trying to get healthy by practicing these steps and taking an approach towards it that challenges those things that are most deeply held in our personalities, in our psyches. So, and I don't want this to sound like psychobabble. This is just steps. But the truth is that if you follow the directions, and the point of that thing is to challenge everything you believe, you can find a real measure of freedom in this process. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to take the basic steps. We're not going to deviate from the instructions in the book at all. It's going to be right straight down the line inventory, right straight out of the book. So this has no poetic license in it at all. It's just following the directions. So here's the thing: if you're sober, newly sober, sober a long time, whatever you are, the question that you have to ask yourself, if you're going to spend the whole day with me today here, is, are you willing to change your mind? Are you willing to challenge what you believe? Are you willing to take a look? Or are you just here to get entertained? If you're here to get entertained, you're missing the point. The real direction of Alcoholics Anonymous is spiritual growth. And in order to grow spiritually, there isn't anyone running around in this room with a magic wand. You know, somebody isn't going to come up and plunk you sober, or they're not going to give you some sort of immediate sense of understanding. That kind of, oh, I get it stuff happens, but usually has to have some work in front of it. So are you willing to do some work? Too many people go to AA meetings and want some sort of spontaneous remission to happen. And the book is very clear about it. It says this is a program of action. And without action, nothing happens. Nothing changes. And the challenge with that is that the hallmark of a person in Alcoholics Anonymous coming through the door is some level of insanity. That's what binds us. So the trick is to find and challenge the insanity, and to become well-adjusted people, I guess is a good term. And you can do that here. And it never has to stop. There is no end game to this thing. I've been doing it for 36 years, and I'm going to continue to do it. And given that most people don't do what my home group does, which is do this right by the numbers once a year, do it the way you want to do it. we're people who think that there's a pot of gold in the middle of this thing, and it's not about the gold. It's about growing spiritually truly as its own reward. That growing, what the book calls growing in understanding and effectiveness, has some significant benefits. One of the greatest benefits is intuition. The book talks at some length about intuitive thought. And intuitive thought, if you chase it, can get almost spooky. You know, people will come up to me and go, "How do you know what I'm thinking?" I asked this lady, she said, "I really want to talk to you about writing inventory." And I said, "Great, and well, let's just get together and I'm more than happy to share my experience with you." And she said, "Good." And I said, "Well, would you like to have lunch someday?" And she said, "Oh, no." And I said, "Why not?" And she said, "Because you know what I'm thinking." And that's not true. I can surmise what you're thinking. But one of the things that happens is that if you challenge what you think long enough, you will have some real insight into what other people think. And that's scary to some people who have never experienced that. So learning intuitive thought, there are so many benefits in this whole thing of challenging this over and over again and finding out the truth about who you are. And I don't want to sell you anything. I'm just telling you what's happened to me. And I had this. I was talking as soon as I landed out here that I had gotten a phone call from a lady, and it was really dismaying because she was asking me if I was dating anyone, and I said, and she had told me about something that she's in the program, and she was talking about this and that, and I said, well, no, but and she said, I'm really happy that I get to talk to you on a regular basis. And I said, well, anybody can do that. And she said, well, are you looking around? And I said, no. And she said, well, I don't think anybody's good enough for you. Jesus, well, there goes my hopes. And you don't want people around you thinking that stuff. I felt so crestfallen after she said that. And I said, everybody's good enough for me. Now, here's the bottom line. I'm going to show you how to write inventory about principles today. But here's the bottom line to that whole inventory. So I'll give you the answer before I give you the question. I am a child of God and an equal to anyone on the face of this planet. No better, no worse, but an equal to anyone. And if you don't believe that, you're lying to yourself. So think about that for a while. You are everything that I am. And what's important is for you to understand that. And I don't spend my life comparing myself to other people. I am what God made. And my job in life is to become what God intended me to be. And that's the only reason why I'm sitting here this morning. So that's what we're going to talk about. Now, before you can address it, you have to know there's a problem. And the problem's alcoholism and all the things that are attendant to that. So how do you know if you're drunk? Who knows? How can you tell? I mean, everybody thinks they drink too much. I mean, that thinks they're drunk, I suppose. I mean, I don't know. But how do you tell? Yeah.
Obsession. When I take one drink, I want another, and another, and another. My friends don't do that. They have a drink and say, "Oh, I'm feeling this," and they stop.
Right.
There's a different physical thing going on.
Do you know what that's called? Oh, here, yeah. We need to try and go ahead.
Do I have to say it again?
Yes.
Okay. There's an obsession that I have when I drink, and when I have one, I know because I tested it. When I have one, I want another and another and another. And I don't stop till I'm passed out or sick. And my friends who are normal drinkers don't do that. They have a half a glass of wine and say, "I'm feeling it," and they stop.
Right.
That's how I can tell I have a physical allergy to alcohol.
What's that called? Because the book talks about it.
Compulsive behavior?
No?
Phenomenon of craving.
Yep.
Phenomenon of craving, thank you.
It's called about craving. And the book says something very interesting about craving. It says it only occurs in the alcoholic. In that, so if I want to know that I'm an alcoholic, first I need to understand that I have to have this phenomenon of craving, which means if you have one, you want another one. It doesn't mean if you don't have any that you want one. All right? That's something entirely different. Craving is when you introduce alcohol into your body and it sets up this deal where you got to put more in there. And that's what craving is. How else can you tell? Yeah. Just a second.
One of the ways I could tell is like I would be in a hotel. I always planned my work around my drinking, not my drinking around my work.
Yes.
So I scheduled my work out of town so I could drink out of town because, don't you know, ladies have to behave in public. So, and I could be throwing up in the toilet asking God to let me vomit my stomach that night. But in my purse would be my miniature for my next moment that I would need. And I always used to carry great big pocketbooks on my shoulder, and they always had miniatures in the bottom of them because you just never know when you need a drink. In my case, it always felt like an urgency and an emergency. And I drank to change the way I was feeling, to behave the way I thought I had to behave for others, not so much what I thought was best in general for myself.
Good. The other way that I would like you to talk about is losing the power of choice in drink. Anybody have that experience? Yeah.
Yes. Is it on?
Yes.
Okay. Even when I didn't want to lose everything that I had, I would have to pick up a drink, and it cost me everything dear to me. It cost, the children, the home, the ability to work, the freedom of physical freedom. They'd lock me up, and I'd get out, and I couldn't help it. I'd pick up a drink. There was no choice. I had absolutely zero choice.
Right.
And self-knowledge availed me nothing.
Right. So at some point you lost the power of choice. My experience with that was that it wasn't a choice about whether I was going to drink every day. It was about when I was going to drink. It was going to happen. And the idea that I could make some sort of conscious choice. that said, well, I really, I got in so much trouble yesterday that I'm not going to drink today. Just didn't happen. At some point, and I could have all the best resolve in the world, but at some point, my mind would convince me that the only thing that would make things right was to take another drink. And so I had completely lost the power of choice. Now, when that happens, you kind of lose hope, because the game's up. And you know that you're out of control, so if you're anything like me, you make the best deal you can. Which means, well, how can I do this without really getting hurt or killed or whatever in the process? How can I keep this going as long as I can? And I still understand that the inevitable outcome of this is either insanity or death. I'll just do the best I can and try and avoid as much pain as I can. And I understand I don't have any choice, and so I'll just have to work with that. That's alcoholism, all right? There's another thing in this book, and here's what it says. If, when you honestly want to, you find you can't quit entirely, that means that if you said, I just got to knock this off. And maybe you pulled off a week, if you were lucky early on. And then you had to go back and drink again, and it was not your intent to start. If that happened, you're probably alcoholic. Or, if once you start, you have little control over the amount you take. See, the most interesting part about that whole statement is the or. The reason why is because it doesn't say and, which if it says or, either one of those is good enough. So if you can't quit when you want to, or you have little control over the amount you take, which means I'm going to have 2 drinks on the way home and then I'm going to make it for dinner. Well, you know how that works. If that's going on, if you stop to have a couple of drinks and you get home on Thursday, or you get home so hammered that whoever is meeting you at the door is just shaking their head going, here they come again. If people are shaking their heads at you when you drink, it's a good chance you got a problem.
That's right.
Okay? So, if either one of those is right, you're probably alcoholic, and that's what the book says. So, here are the tests. Craving, losing the power of choice, if when you honestly want to, you can't quit entirely, or if you have little choice over the amount you take. All of those are 4 tests that the book talks about for alcoholism. And I had all 4. And you don't have to have all 4. You can have 3. But if you're going to go work with someone, ask them those questions. I have told 2 people in the last year that I wouldn't work with them. Do you know that there's a lot of people that come into Alcoholics Anonymous who aren't alcoholics? Do you? Yeah, and for a variety of reasons. Some people have been convinced because of a bad experience that they're alcoholics, and so they, grudgingly go to AA, and they're no more alcoholic than I'm Santa Claus. There are people who are sort of marginally mentally ill that can't establish social platforms, and they'll come to 12-step programs because In most AA meetings, if you say you're an alcoholic, everybody else goes right. Okay? And so they can come in here and they can establish this sort of social platform that allows them to feel more normal and doesn't keep them isolated. And we have examples of that all over our groups in Denver. Some people are confused about their addiction. Sometimes, and some of the biggest offenders here are treatment centers. I'll tell you, I haven't heard it here once, but I'm sure that it's around. The people in Alcoholics Anonymous that say I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. Figure out what the hell you are. And the other thing is, even if you don't understand it, every time you say that, you violate the traditions. And the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous say that anything other than alcohol is an outside issue. And so, I might as well say I'm an alcoholic and a Norwegian. Or I'm an alcoholic and an oxygen dependent. It makes about as much sense. And, if people want to be members of this fellowship, we ought to at least respect the traditions that are part of it. So that's my soapbox for the day. Yeah.
One of the first things when someone comes up to... when someone comes up to me and they're asking for help, and they're asking for sponsorship, one of my first questions to them is, well, let's get together and talk.
Right.
And so I go off to the side for more than 5 minutes. I say, let's meet and let's talk. And my first question to them is, tell me about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I determine whether this person may or may not have a problem with alcoholism. And that's one of the first questions I ask, because I was gifted with listening when I was early on in sobriety, and one of the gentlemen had mentioned the same thing you had mentioned, that there are many people in Alcoholics Anonymous that are truly not alcoholics.
Right.
And that made me think. It was like, okay, well, what does he mean by that, and what's he saying? And then he said the first thing he does is he asks them to tell them about themselves. Tell them your story. And so that's key. And I too have not sponsored people because it wasn't appropriate, bottom line. So I'm glad you said that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first questions that I ask people is, tell me about your drinking. And what happens when you take a drink? And they'll say, well, it isn't usually the first drink, but this or that, right? And you say, but when you have one drink, what happens? And if they're drunks, they'll say, I have another one, right? But I've gone out on, and I'm as bad a drunk as anybody you're going to ever meet. I have gone out on social occasions and had 2 drinks. But when I got home, oh man. I was a marketing director for this big paper company, and we would go, my wife and I would go to parties with the presidents and vice presidents of these big paper companies. And they were very uppity kind of social occasions. And you'd sit around and have polite conversation, for 2 hours, and then everybody'd go home. And it just killed me. Jesus, my body and my mind would go into open revolt. I wanted to scream or get angry or do something. But the whole idea of having to force myself to act normal or to limit the number of drinks I had was absolutely one of the toughest things I had to do. So I would encourage you with new people to ask them, what happens when you drink? And what you're looking for is craving. Yeah. Just where's the mic?
Mike, you can hear me.
I can, they can't.
Maybe you cannot. I thought that the difference between like a clinical definition of alcoholism, where I'm going to diagnose you, and being a member of AA is that all I have to do is want to quit drinking.
Okay.
And that I'm the only one that knows if I'm an alcoholic.
That's a nice idea, but it doesn't hold water. There are people who don't like the taste and say, I don't want to do this anymore. So just not wanting to drink is nice, but doesn't, at least, and I'm giving you an opinion, so you need to understand that you can discard it. Opinions, well, everybody knows what opinions are. And so the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking, right? Why would you want to stop drinking unless it was a problem? I don't know. I'm a little confused about that. I mean, about people hanging their hat on that. Because people can want to stop drinking, I suppose, for a whole variety of reasons, one of which is not that they drink alcoholically. So, if you have a desire to stop drinking, it sort of assumes that it's become a problem. And so, I think that you have to have craving. You have to have lost the power of choice. Or you still have a choice. And from this book's definition of alcoholism, those things need to be present. So, because you can still make a conscious decision to not do that anymore. If you haven't lost the power of choice, then you still have choice. And if you still have choice, what the hell are you doing here?
But why would you want to diagnose someone else? I mean, if I'm here and I got a problem with alcohol,
yes,
and I'm willing to work the steps,
yes,
what good does it do you or me for you to say whether or not I'm an alcoholic? Because
and there's someone else back there who wants to talk too. But for this reason, if I'm not sure you're an alcoholic, I won't work with you. Because I don't know why you're here. If you don't sound like me, I don't think this is going to work. And I'll tell you why. Because you can't have a spiritual experience based on a lie. Okay? All right.
Hi, my name is Tony Schultz. I'm an alcoholic.
Tony.
And I'm an alcoholic, the variety that the book talks about. And there are a lot of people that come in that are heavy drinkers. The reason, and I'm not here to diagnose anyone, but I have seen people who are not alcoholic who may have had a problem with alcohol but can stop. They're sponsoring alcoholics. And the way they sponsor is, well, just don't drink. Because that's what they can do. And again, this is just my observation. I'm not an authority on Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's dangerous for non-alcoholics to be in Alcoholics Anonymous sponsoring alcoholics.
I think that one of the words that is difficult for me to deal with is diagnosis, because I'm in that business. Well, so I provide psychiatric care. for the Colorado Department of Corrections. And I don't diagnose people in Alcoholics Anonymous. What it asks me to do if I'm going to work for someone is to be convinced that they're alcoholic. It says that in the book. So, I do what's in here. And so when I sit down and talk to them, I have to be convinced that they are alcoholic. And if they don't have what I have, which is craving and losing the power of choice and all the rest of that stuff, then they're not like me. And then I don't think that solution I have will work the same way for them. And so I don't diagnose people. I sit down and ask them the questions. Tell me what happens when you drink. If you take one drink, what happens? Have you tried to quit? Did you ever pull it off? Tell me about drinking 2 drinks. What happens if you want to just have 2 drinks? Does that work for you? And it doesn't have to work all the time, as long as it works part of the time. So I ask all those questions of them, and if they can't answer those questions, I don't work with them. Okay?
Hi, I'm Christy Lynn, and I am an alcoholic and grateful to be here today. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Bobo.
You're welcome.
Thank you. My question is, I related quite a bit to your story last night as far as how part of the brain stems, and you've got your alcoholism, the genetic, and then you have the stress and trauma that also goes through that and starts at such a young age. I too didn't start drinking or using until later in life. However, my question is, I guess I know that I'm an alcoholic, but what I'm hearing is confusing things, and what I've normally heard is that people start drinking at a very young age. What is your take on the emotional part and how that affiliates with alcoholism? Because I just didn't want to feel the pain. I literally didn't want to feel the pain. And then when I had to feel the pain, I'd want more. It's a little different for me. However, I still believe that I'm an alcoholic and didn't know how to cope with life without it until the 12 steps and the program. And it has taught me to be able to live life on life's terms, so to speak.
Let me ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
When you took a drink, what happened?
I didn't have to feel. It was great. And then yes, I would want more because the pain was so. It just had been carried and shoved down for so many years, and it was and it's hard.
Okay.
And today I'm learning how to walk through each one of those incidents.
So at some point, did you find out you had no choice, that you were going to have to drink?
Well, I made the choice to not feel the pain.
Well, that's a way to hide that. But at some point, did you get up and know that you were going to drink that day and that there wasn't a choice?
Yes, because it became unmanageable. I became powerless.
Okay. All right. When people drink to excess, and especially, and there are periodic drunks, and they just binge drink and then stop, and then binge drink and stop.
Almost daily.
But daily drinkers, and have a tendency to go out of control and to exhibit antisocial behavior, I suppose is the nicest way to put that. When that happens and our lives start spinning out of control, we become angry and frustrated. And then trying to live a normal life or live a life that we've got a picture of in our mind becomes progressively more difficult. And we become progressively more frustrated. And life becomes a really difficult situation for us. And it's like living in a loop. You just can't get out of it. Okay? And so the emotional distress that you're talking about is an attendant form to alcoholism. And it's all about social behavior and all stuff like that. But once you drink alcoholically, the other portions of your life become much more difficult. And that the kind of emotional distress and frustration is just a form that comes with it. I mean, I don't know anybody that drank alcoholically that didn't exhibit some sort of odd behavior. It's just what happens when you put too much alcohol in your system. So it's not unusual that those things happen together. The trick is, what are you going to do about that when you stop? See, when I stop, then I'm an alcoholic who somebody shut the door on. Then I don't have alcohol as an escape mechanism, and when I really start feeling bad, what the hell do I do with that? And so then I have to have some other avenue to make the frustration go away. In working the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous allow me to have a more objective view of the world. That all of a sudden I can start engaging in reality instead of these flights of fancy that I was having when I was drinking.
Thank you very much.
Yep. All right. So, let me just go back to diagnosis. I don't do that.
What I was saying to her is, to me, if you can do the first step, you're an alcoholic. I mean, that's what it says. I'm powerless. I can't make decisions about it anymore. I have no freedom, And I guess that's what I'm saying. If a person's willing to work the steps, and if they can answer it in their own mind, that this program will benefit them. And I would hate to see anyone say to someone else, I'm sorry, I can't help you, you're not an alcoholic. Because if he thinks he is, and if if he drinks in such a way that he has no power over it and it's making his life unmanageable, then I think he can benefit from the 12 steps and he ought to be given the opportunity. And I sure wouldn't want to say to him, I can't help you because you're not a real alcoholic.
I would.
Yeah. Well,
so I'd respectfully disagree with you, but it's all right. We don't all have to agree. That's a nice part about Alcoholics Anonymous. Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Bob. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. It's never occurred to me to ask anybody when they ask me to sponsor them to have them tell me about their drinking. My experience is I tried sponsoring a woman in Alcoholics Anonymous. I am just a straight up drunk, did not do any of what's been called party favors, the outside issues, whatever. And it turned out this woman had some significant outside issues. I mean, she was a meth addict. And what I found out after spending a lot of time and a lot of energy with this woman is that she was high on meth all the time I was working with her.
Oh, jeez.
Yes, and so what I had to tell her is, I can't help you because I have not had your experience. Before having that discussion, I went and talked to friends, and there were people in our fellowship who have had those experiences and I said, so-and-so and so-and-so could probably help you because they've had your experience.
Right.
I can't help somebody who's having experiences that I have no earthly clue of. And that's just the bottom line. And it's not that she didn't belong.
Right.
And it isn't that I didn't care about her. It's just that I am not capable of helping her. Period.
Yes.
Thank you.
I went to a meeting in Los Angeles one day, and there was a guy that came in there, and he he got up and he was really frustrated, and he was raising his voice and going on, and he said, look, I'm in an AA meeting and I'm a cocaine addict. And he said, but I go to CA and I can't find a solution. And you guys have a solution, and I can see it by coming into this meeting, so I come in here and say I'm an alcoholic. What's the matter with that? It's a lie. Can't have a spiritual experience based on a lie. I think that you're right in the respect that working these spiritual principles will help anyone under any circumstances. I just think that people, even if they come into Alcoholics Anonymous and go through the steps and do all the rest of that, if they're not alcoholic, are liable to lead someone else to believe that they don't have to do this, or that it isn't necessary, or they're going to start sharing some experience which doesn't have to do with alcoholism or whatever. So I think Alcoholics Anonymous is for alcoholics. Now, I'm kind of hard line, but you invited me.
My name's Eric. I'm an alcoholic.
Yep.
Bob, I like your question. Tell me about your drinking.
Yes.
As one Norwegian to another, I have to respectfully disagree with the tenor of I've worked in mental health since 1980 with chemical dependency. And you got me sitting here thinking, I haven't thought since 1979, I haven't had any doubts about whether I'm an alcoholic. And believe me, I fit those criteria, and I can hear the wheels turning in here. And about half the people in this room are going, am I really an alcoholic?
Right.
I've seen much more danger from people saying, gee, I'm not really an alcoholic, and going back out and drinking, than I have from a few people who aren't alcoholics showing up at AA meetings. We can survive that.
Right.
And I remember the RAND Corporation came out in like 1980, and they said, some alcoholics can learn to drink safely again. And you know what? Thousands and thousands and thousands of alcoholics went back out. That was just what they needed, that little thing. To me, denial's a lot stronger and a lot more dangerous than having a few folks around who may have mental illness or may only be scarcely potential alcoholics, as the big book says.
Sure.
So.
Well, if you think that's offensive, wait till you hear this. Now I forgot what I was going to say. And I appreciate your opinion. I do. What I'm concerned about is what I'm doing. I'm concerned about the health of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I know that to some real degree that the message is getting diluted, and I'm terrified that at some point one of my kids or one of their kids is going to come into Alcoholics Anonymous and get an entirely different message. So at some point I'll think about what I was trying to remember, but go ahead.
Hi, my name's Teresa. I'm alcoholic.
Teresa.
And I'm in the book. And I know that for me, when I quit drinking, I felt like I was getting worse. That's
right.
why I had to work the steps, because I had to learn how to live.
Yes.
And for me, I'm still not well, and I get resentful.
Sure. Because
I have this mental illness, whatever you want to call it. And when I'm in a room and there's people that aren't alcoholic, I feel different again. And I think for me, I need to be with my kind.
Right.
That have not only that loses the control of their drinking and all the cravings and all that stuff, but the mind, the way I think, sometimes, I'm not well. And I have to work the steps. And I don't believe that we should be a catch-all for all the illnesses that we have out there. And alcoholism will kill me.
Right.
Whether I'm drinking or not. And I get afraid also. that where will I go? You know, we have mental institutions for people that are mentally ill, that are really diagnosed mentally ill. Or what? Well, but anyway, this is just my opinion, that I can't, I just think that Alcoholics Anonymous is for alcoholics.
Yes.
Anyway, that's all.
Let me tell you about what my sponsor made me go through when I was when I was first sober. I had gone through the steps. I had gone through the steps twice, and then I went back to him and I said, I want to go through this thing again, and he said, all right, on your first step, here's what I want you to do. I want you to think that maybe you're not an alcoholic. I want you to consider the idea that you're not alcoholic. And then I want you to go through the process of proving to yourself again that you have alcoholism, but I want you to start with the premise that maybe you're not. And I went, oh no. No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to get confused and fall back into that same trap. And he said, Bob, you're never going to have a good solid first step unless you're willing to consider that. Okay? Now, I know that Rand Corporation and I know Schick and some of those other people came out and they had all these weird ideas, and the weirdest one was Raleigh Hills. Jesus, they invited me to come over and watch that thing, and they had this room full of alcohol. And right in the middle of it was this kind of throne. And they said, come on over and sit down. And so I sat down, and they wheeled this big basin in front of me. And they'd have you drink, and then they'd give you Ipecac or something. And you'd just barf your guts out in this basin. This big stainless steel basin, and it was medieval. Jesus, it was aversion therapy. And I'm looking at this going, I don't think this is going to work. I mean, I threw up my guts the first time I drank, and I couldn't wait to do it again. So, I know that all that stuff went on, and I know that there are some real concerns that we'll lose people. But I'll tell you what, one of the reasons why I'm out here is to make you think. And so if half of you are sitting in this room considering your alcoholism, God bless you. You need to. Okay? Not because you're not alcoholic, but because it's extremely important for you to have a good, solid first step. And you need to be convinced. So if I make you uncomfortable, good. Yeah.
I'm an alcoholic. My name is Lucinda. Right here.
Where are you?
Right here.
Okay.
I don't tell my story in the details that at this level usually, because I don't want to give myself any reason to ever think I'm different. That's essential to my health. And I did not get the phenomenon of craving after I had the first drink. I never got that. I was able to stop after a reasonable amount of alcohol. But I had the phenomenon of craving in that I could not take the first drink. That was so clear. I could say all day, I'm not going to have that drink, and I couldn't. So for that reason, I feel I qualify, and for a variety of other reasons. But when I first came in here, I felt that I didn't belong, even though AA worked for me. It was the only thing that worked for me. Until I read in the 12 and 12 about how that there are some of us that are barely alcoholics, that we are potential alcoholics, and that there will be a day that AA can reach these people. And I knew I was one of them. And that thank God AA wasn't like a physician that said, your cholesterol is high, come back in here after you have a heart attack. You didn't do that. You said, you can, if you qualify, you can stay. And I've worked, and I've been in here many years, and not until today have I doubted that I'm an alcoholic. And I realize how powerful our words are. Love and tolerance is our code. We all have our opinions, and really it's up to me and my higher power. Thank you for the opportunity to talk.
I'm Kathy.
So let me just understand what you just said. You said that you knew you were going to drink every day, but that you didn't develop the phenomenon of craving once you started. Okay, but
the cravings to have more.
So, but you knew you were going to drink every day. Is that?
I thought I wasn't going to drink, but every day was wrong.
So you drank, but you only had one drink?
Not necessarily even every day. Sometimes I could go for a month. Not necessarily even every day. Sometimes, I had all sorts of complicated rules around it.
Right.
But, normal people don't put those rules. The amount doesn't matter. The damn rules were running me. It was very difficult to maintain. But I was and when I wasn't drinking as a dry drunk, I was thinking about it. So I had that phenomenon of craving even without the alcohol. And the only way it was lifted was by working the steps and picking up all the tools. Thanks.
Okay.
I'm Kathy. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Kathy.
Thank you for coming out and challenging me. I appreciate it.
It's all right.
A lot. I appreciate a lot of things you said. I have tried over the last 22 years to sponsor women that are drug addicts in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it becomes extremely painful for them and extremely painful for me because I do not understand that phenomenon. I don't even know when they're using and not using. Unlike alcohol, I know right away whether they're drinking or not. And I was that kind of alcoholic that spent all my time orchestrating my drinking. I believe it was a sincere phenomenon of craving that I knew that I was going to drink. I knew that I couldn't get through the day without drinking half that bottle of wine. I knew I couldn't sleep at night without it. And I knew aversion therapy would have never worked, or I wouldn't have had my head in the toilet in Bakersfield with my hair all over it when I'm germ-phobic. Puking my brains out, carrying away a miniature and knowing in 3 months I'm going to be right back there doing it again. I just felt I was sicker than most because a good alcoholic would drink every day and not have to worry about it for 3 months holding out. And so it just owned me. Alcohol owned me. And I remember the day like yesterday that I was sitting at a table knowing if I drank, I'd die. And I didn't want to drink, and there was no way I could do that. And there was not enough alcohol that I could consume, because I certainly practiced for a lot of years getting it down, that could keep me from killing myself. There wasn't enough I could swallow. And that passing out was no longer going to work. I would still kill myself when I woke up. I was in that point when I knew I belonged here. And so I just appreciate you saying that, because I've often of late had to say to women, if you're a drug addict in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm not your sponsor. I can't do the work with you because I don't understand the problem.
Right.
And my experience has been that the problem is different. It does look different. Working close up and personal, it looks very different. And I, too, want to preserve Alcoholics Anonymous like you. And I have sat through a meeting, a huge celebration, where the speaker was a drug addict. And I was so physically sick in my body because I didn't even get the funnies. I felt like I was an alien and I landed on the wrong planet. And if this is Alcoholics Anonymous, then I'm in the wrong place. So I don't really want someone in Cocaine Anonymous to run a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you.
Right. How about you, Kyle?
My name is Doug. I'm an alcoholic.
Oh, hey, Doug.
And thank you very much for presenting this. And like you said, just reiterating what you said, it's to make me think, am I a real alcoholic? I qualify. I don't know if other people do, and I can't think for other people, and I can't wish them the door. I only know for myself, I qualify as an alcoholic. And it says in the book, if you don't think you're an alcoholic, go try some more drinking. I don't understand what the debate or the discussion is about this. If you're a real alcoholic in Alcoholics Anonymous. So anyway, that's just my...
Thanks. Yeah. Let me say something about emotional sobriety. One of the things that happened, that every once in a while somebody will come up to me and they go, I really wish that I felt or that I had the same response to some of this that you have. And I want to go, what response? And they said, you really don't care what other people think of you, do you? And the answer is, no, I don't. You know, I get up every day with the intent of living a life that's pleasing to God. I take strong opinions in the middle of that. And incidentally, just so you know, the definitions that I used for alcoholism are all in this book, right? Every single one of them. And so I'm not making this shit up to piss you off. I'm telling you what's in here, and I believe explicitly what's in here. So, you know, if I piss you off, my name goes in the first column. I will sleep like a baby tonight, and if you're still up walking around going, God damn that son of a bitch, tough shit. I'll show you how to write inventory as we go through the day. Kyle.
I'm an alcoholic. My name is Kyle. And, our traditions say, that if you say you're a member, you're a member. That does not make you an alcoholic. And that's okay. If you come into Alcoholics Anonymous and you've worked the steps and it's making your life better, I'm happy for you. However, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous with a broken brain, a twisted soul, and imaginary friends, and the disease of alcoholism in full bloom. Alcoholics Anonymous didn't make my life better. It saved my life. That, to me, is the difference. Don't come in here and tell me, that I'm a bad, evil person, because I'm an alcoholic, that as it describes in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love Alcoholics Anonymous and it's saved my life. Don't tell me I'm a bad person because I defend Alcoholics Anonymous. Don't tell me that I'm telling you that you don't belong here. I've never said that to anybody who's ever come into Alcoholics Anonymous. You are a member if you say you are a member, but that doesn't make you an alcoholic. But don't make me the bad guy because I am. I'm offended by that. So I'm not going to tell you can't come into AA, but don't tell me, that I have to let you in here because, I've never told you couldn't come in. I get a little offended by the militancy that comes in here and tells Alcoholics Anonymous it has to change because I don't like the way you do it. This has saved very, very many people's lives. Let's give it some credit. Let's give it some due. Let's respect the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, and let's not fight amongst each other. This whole topic that we've been doing this morning has gone on for too damn long. We're talking about emotional sobriety, and I think we're being very immature at this point. That's all I got.
Well, I'm Lorraine, an alcoholic, and I guess I won't say anything. All I wanted to say is, somebody said something about sponsoring drug addicts versus alcoholics, etc. And I do a lot of H&I, and I've gone into jails where girls come up and they say, I'm not an alcoholic, I'm an addict. And I've been with women who want to go ahead and discuss Alcoholics Anonymous with them, and I step up and ask them, if the drugs weren't around, would you have taken a drink? And there are many women who say no. And I say, God bless you, there's other programs for you.
Sure.
And I don't waste my time or their time, and I move on. And I find there are many drug addicts who will drink like I did. And that's the disease of alcoholism. And my disease, I've often said, doesn't care what I take. If alcohol isn't available, I want something. And I know I'm an alcoholic. I have absolutely no doubt. But the thing is I don't want to change the program that is my oxygen that saved my life to make you comfortable.
Right.
If you're not comfortable here, thank God there are many other 12-step programs. And, you know, if you don't have the disease of alcoholism, I don't want to change for you. So thank you.
We had let me just mention one thing. We had a whole group of drug addicts who came into our group. And what we told them was we were going to do a workshop for them and show them how to work steps. And they would say that, and they came in there and took all his step work back to NA. And did our program basically in NA. And it was great. Because most of them were people like you described that wouldn't go to alcohol if they didn't use drugs. And so we were trying to figure out what the right thing to do was, and the General Service Office asked us to direct them to whatever program fitted their problem. And we knew that NA was the program, but they didn't like the fact that they couldn't get the kind of recovery in NA that they were getting from us, so we showed them what we did. And it took 6 months and took them through the steps and did the whole deal, yeah.
My name's Ted. I'm an alcoholic. I didn't do that last time. As much as I would like to think highly of myself, there's a couple of things that I know that are true. I'm not going to get anybody sober, and I'm not going to keep anybody sober. I have a loving God as He may express Himself through me and through my group conscience. And, you know, that's the one thing I have to remember, too. That, you know, there are many people in Alcoholics Anonymous. In fact, I'll tell you a real short story this morning. I went to a meeting. There was a gal there who talked at the meeting, and she was at the meeting, and she had described when she woke up, she started getting the obsession, and she started looking through the house for anything and everything, and she went this way and that way, and she said she was going nuts and everything else. And then she said, well, I went to a meeting, then after the meeting I went home and I kept looking for some stuff, and then I got in my car and drove to Roseville. I went to another meeting, then I got in my car and I went to a meeting up in North San Juan, and then I couldn't get rid of the obsession, and then I came to a meeting here, and I just sat down, and I really wanted to drink yesterday, she said. And I was thinking to myself, God, I'd love to work with that woman, you know what I'm saying? And so I understand where she's coming from, but the fact is that, you know, I'm not going to get anybody sober, and I'm not going to keep anybody sober, but I do have my experience, and that's all I have. And I'm open to change, and I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep.
I'm Robert. I'm an alcoholic. Bob, one thing I feel is, like in music and everything else, harmony is not unison. So I kind of think we are talking about emotional sobriety and how all these principles fit together. I found myself in the book, and there's a lot of things in that book. And the thing that really resonated for me was that it's really about my thinking more than about my drinking.
Yeah, it is.
And so to me, a lot of this conversation can really focus on the drinking when the book says to me, it's really about our thinking. And another thing it says is to look at the similarities, not the differences. And so I think that's, you know, and the last thing I say, I mean, my sponsor doesn't talk to me about me. He doesn't try to relate to me. He tells me about him. And that's what helps me see better.
Right.
And so I think that's, I mean, to me, these are the principles of emotional sobriety. Is how do we stay open? How do we remain inclusive? And how do we let people, you know, get what we've got? How do we, you know, attract them rather than try to promote them?
Okay. Let's move on to, are you even willing to believe? Now that you're all thinking. The book says that if you're even willing to believe, upon the simple cornerstone a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. The book talks about power a lot right there. It says lack of power is our dilemma. How are we to find that power? Well, that's what this book is about. And then it talks about two different kinds of people. It talks about people with power, peace, happiness, and a sense of direction. And then it talks about the bedevilments. Are you all familiar with the bedevilments? What page is it on? 53? Huh? 52. You'll have to excuse me. My book is all in pieces. On 52. No, I don't see it.
We had to ask ourselves why.
Oh yeah, there it is. Here are the bedevilments. We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Those are the bedevilments. And this book in the second step talks about two different kinds of people. People who have all of these challenges or part of these challenges. And then these other people who have power, peace, happiness, and a sense of direction. And the difference is that the people with power, peace, happiness, and a sense of direction have God as the central fact in their lives. So that makes a powerful argument for why we should believe. One of the things that it discusses is that it says if we're even willing to believe, that we'll feel new power flowing in with just a willingness to believe. And so all of a sudden we feel like there's power in our lives. The trick with power, it says lack of power is our dilemma, and then it says we feel new power flowing in. It defines the power. It says that power which is God. And then the problem with power is that essentially we're not supposed to use it unless we're helping someone else. The challenge with an alcoholic is when you start feeling that power, and at some point you will, you'll see that you truly have the power to influence other people. And when you feel that, don't run away with it. The trick is that it's not yours. Right? And as soon as we decide that it's ours, any self-respecting alcoholic is going to try to find its limits. So we will become more powerful, and then we go, well, I wonder what I could do with that. And we will try and use it for our own benefit. And as soon as we do that, we make a terrible mistake. Yeah. So please be careful. You know, as an alcoholic, when you say lack of power is our dilemma, that's not a joke. I mean, did you have the power to take care of yourself? Did you have the power to keep jobs? Did you have the power to stay in relationships? Did you have the power to support yourself? Did you have the kind of power that you wanted in your life? And the answer is no, if you're drunk. I mean, you weren't operating on all cylinders when you were a drunk, unless you're a very odd kind of drunk. So there were challenges that you were experiencing in life, and most of them had a lack of power attached to it. The problem is that when we start feeling power, and we will, it's hard not to try and use it. So you go, well, I wonder if I could influence that lady. I wonder if I could make some money. And you can't go there. I mean, it's not bad to make money. It's not bad to have relationships. It's just trying to get crafty with power, because it's God's power. And God can exhibit that through us. So anyway, be careful what you do with power. The book says this. It says, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, we could neither postpone nor evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that God either is or He isn't. He's either everything or He's nothing. And then it asks you what your choice is. What's my self-imposed crisis? So actually, that's close. It's about I can't fix myself. It's not alcoholism, surprisingly. It's that I can't fix myself. The alcoholism almost becomes incidental. But all of a sudden, I have a progressive and fatal disease, and I can't stop the damn thing no matter what I do. So, I can't postpone it. I can't make it go away. I can't go on vacation and leave it at home. I can't do any of that stuff. And so I have to fearlessly face this proposition that God either is or He isn't. Why? Because I can't fix myself and you can't fix me. All right? Now I'm on the horns of a dilemma. And my dilemma is, what am I going to do now? There doesn't seem to be any hope. If I can't stop this and you can't stop this, there better be somebody that can stop this. And here we're squarely confronted with the issue of faith. That's what the book says. So there better be a God. Now what? Now I have to turn to Him, but I don't even know who He is. Is there somebody over there wanting to say something?
I think we've got 3 more minutes on the TV.
All right. Well, let's not take any chances. Here's what we're going to do for the rest of the morning. When there's going to be a break now, and then we're going to come back and talk about the third step before lunch, and then right after lunch, I'm going to show you how we write inventory. Well, good.
There we go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'll show you what we do about writing inventory. I'll show you how to challenge your beliefs. And I'll show you how to inventory principles. So that's a really fun thing to do, incidentally. And you can. It changed my whole life when I was 28 years sober. So anyway, I'll see you in a while.